At the time of writing this video, there have been 47 US presidencies, with 45 individuals holding the office. In today's video, we will look at every single US president's death, how they died, and whether their death was impactful. We shall start with the first president to hold office, and the first to die, George Washington. He was in office from 1789 until 1797. He served as the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the War of Independence. He was then elected to the presidency with unanimous backing from the Electoral College. Washington died on the 14th of December 1799 from complications following a severe throat infection. He had spent a great deal of time riding in the freezing December rains around his farm, which weakened his body. As was common for the time, Washington requested that he be drained of blood, losing around 40% of all the blood in his body, around 2.5 litres. His body became too weak and his throat closed. The next president to die was Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president between 1801 and 1809. Jefferson died aged 83 on the 4th of July 1826, on the 50th anniversary of the ratification of the Declaration of Independence, which was his most notable work. His health had been in slow decline. He had an infection in his buttocks, which was possibly septic. He had damaged kidneys and pneumonia caused by a lack of mobility. His exact cause of death is not actually known, though it was likely a combination of these ailments and prostate cancer. The next president to die was John Adams, the second president who served from 1797 until 1801. Remarkably, John Adams died only a few hours after Thomas Jefferson on the 4th of July 1826. He died from a heart attack aged 90 years old. And reportedly, before he died, he gave an acknowledgement to his longtime rival and friend, stating, "Thomas Jefferson survives," unaware that he had only just died a few hours before. The next president to die was James Monroe, the fifth president who was in office between 1817 and 1825. His presidency is perhaps most notable for his expansion of the United States, both westward in Missouri and south with the acquisition of Florida. Monroe would even continue the trend set by the two previous presidents. He too died on the 4th of July 1831. He passed away aged 73 from tuberculosis and heart failure. The fifth president to die was James Madison, who served as the fourth president between 1809 and 1817. He died on the 28th of June 1836 of congestive heart failure. He was offered by his doctors a series of life-prolonging treatments so that he might last until the 4th of July. Madison refused these treatments, breaking the tradition that seemed to have been forming. The sixth president to die was William Henry Harrison, the ninth president. Harrison has the dubious honor of being America's shortest-serving president, lasting just 31 days in office. His death is often attributed to his refusal to wear appropriate clothing for the cold weather. He delivered his 2-hour-long inauguration speech in freezing rain, without a coat and a hat, and a habit he continued during his presidency, though it's now believed that Harrison died from enteric fever from typhoid-infected water. The seventh president to die was the seventh president, Andrew Jackson, in office between 1829 and 1837. Jackson died on the 8th of June 1845 from a host of chronic illnesses, including edema and heart failure, though there is some suspicion that heavy metal poisoning may have played a part in his poor health. He was taking mercury and sugar of lead, common treatments at the time. He also had 2 lead bullets lodged in his body, consequences from his habit of settling disputes with duels. The next president to die was John Quincy Adams, the sixth president who was in office between 1825 and 1829. After his presidency, and for the rest of his life, Adams served in the House of Representatives. In 1846 he suffered a stroke, but was able to return to Congress the following year. On the 21st of February 1848 he suffered another stroke on the House floor, this time a fatal one. He died 2 days later, aged 80. The ninth president to die was James K. Polk, the 11th president who served between 1845 and 1849. Polk died on the 15th of June 1849, only 3 months after leaving office. This gave him the shortest retirement of any president. His cause of death was cholera, contracted on a tour of the southern states after leaving office. The next president to die was Zachary Taylor, the 12th president, who only lasted in office from 1849 until 1850. Taylor died in office from a sudden stomach illness in July of 1850. This would go on to spark decades of rumors that Taylor had been assassinated, poisoned. But in 1991, samples of Taylor's body confirmed that he had in fact died of gastroenteritis, contamination of food probably from the open sewers Washington, D.C. had at the time. The 11th president to die was John Tyler, the 10th president who served from 1841 until 1845. Tyler had been William Henry Harrison's vice president, and there was much discussion about whether he could be considered the president or merely an acting president. In the end, it was decided that Tyler would see out the remainder of Harrison's term as president, setting what would be known as the Tyler precedent for the future cases of presidents dying in office. Tyler died on the 18th of January 1862 following a stroke. It should be noted that Tyler's death is the only one in presidential history not to be officially recognized in Washington due to his allegiance to the Confederate States of America. The 12th president to die was Martin Van Buren, who served as the 8th president between 1837 and 1841. Van Buren was the first president to be born a United States citizen. He was born in 1782 in Kinderhook, New York, after the American Revolution. All previous presidents were born as British subjects in the colonies. Van Buren died in 1862 from heart failure, asthma, and pneumonia. He lived just long enough to see the start of the American Civil War. The 13th president to die was Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president who served between 1861 and 1865. Lincoln often ranks amongst the greatest and most popular presidents on account of his abolition of slavery and leading the US against the Confederacy in the Civil War. He also bears the dubious honor of being the first assassinated president. On the 14th of April, 1865, he was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth at the Ford's Theatre. He died the next morning on the 15th of April, 1865, from his gunshot wound. James Buchanan was the next president to die, having served as the 15th president. He served from 1857 to 1861. He is noted for being the only president to not have married. His niece, Harriet Lane, took on the unofficial role as First Lady, becoming a popular figure and one who would set the mold for future First Ladies. In his final years, Buchanan published writings defending his actions in office that led up to the Civil War. He died on the 1st of June 1868 from respiratory failure. The next president to die was Franklin Pierce, the 14th president who served one term between 1853 and 1857. Pierce was noted for his heavy drinking, which contributed to his poor health and ultimately his death. Pierce's drinking would be a symptom of his depression, caused by witnessing his 11-year-old son Benjamin's death in a train derailment. Pierce died on the 8th of October 1869 from inflammation of the stomach and cirrhosis of the liver. And now, the one you've all been waiting for. The 16th president to die was Millard Fillmore. He was the 13th president between 1850 and 1853. Fillmore served as Zachary Taylor's vice president and took over the office after his death. Whilst he was Taylor's VP, Fillmore rarely spoke or even interacted with Taylor. He was the last president who was a member of the Whig Party, and he died from a stroke on the 8th of March 1874. The next president to die was Andrew Johnson, who was the 17th president between 1865 and 1869. Johnson was the last president to serve without being a Democrat or a Republican. He died of a stroke on the 31st of July 1875 after collapsing while visiting family. The next president to die was James A. Garfield, the 20th president, who served for only 6 months. Garfield survived an attempted assassination. He was shot in the arm and the back. His wounds were bad, with one of the bullets lodged inside his abdomen. But the doctors treating him used dirty instruments and unwashed hands. When searching for the bullet, they did more damage to his internal organs. He managed to survive for 79 days after the shooting, but he succumbed to his wounds and septic shock on the 19th of September 1881. The 19th president to die was Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president who served for 2 terms between 1869 and 1877. Grant led the Union Army to victory during the American Civil War, but his time in office was mired by the corruption of his cabinet. In 1872, Grant was arrested for speeding, driving his horse-drawn carriage too fast. To this day, he remains the only sitting president to be arrested, but who knows who might be next. Grant died on the 23rd of July, 1885, of throat cancer. The 20th president to die was Chester A. Arthur, who was the 21st president between 1881 and 1885. Arthur secretly battled Bright's disease, a kidney disease that causes high blood pressure and heart failure. He hid his condition so thoroughly that not even his close associates were aware of his condition. On the 17th of November, 1886, he suffered a stroke and died the following day. The next president to die was Rutherford B. Hayes, who served one term as the 19th president between 1877 and 1881. His election was controversial as he lost the popular vote and 20 of the electoral votes were disputed. A special commission eventually awarded him the presidency, with 185 to 184 electoral votes. On the morning of the 17th of January 1893, after a night of worsening heart symptoms, he collapsed and died of a heart attack. The 22nd president to die was Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd president, who was in office for one term between 1889 and 1893. He was the president to have electricity installed in the White House, but was so afraid of electrocution that he refused to touch the light switches. His term is noticeable for his annexation of Hawaii during his final months of his term. On the 13th of March 1901, he died from pneumonia and typhoid fever, aged 68. The 23rd president to die was William McKinley, who was the 25th president between 1897 and 1901. He was the third president to be assassinated, shot by Leon Czolgosz on the 6th of September 1901. Leon's motivation was the furtherance of his political ideology, anarchism, believing that McKinley represented the oppressive state. McKinley initially survived the gunshot wounds, 2 shots to the abdomen. Doctors managed to remove one of the bullets, but the other remained. The wounds turned gangrenous, and on the 14th of September, McKinley died. This assassination led to the formation of full-time protection of American presidents by the Secret Service. The next to die was Grover Cleveland, who was both the 22nd and 24th president of the U.S. His first term was between 1885 and 1889, and his second term between 1893 and 1897, the first president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Cleveland died of a heart attack on the 24th of June 1908, having had problems with his heart for years. The 25th president to die was Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president who was in office from 1901 to 1909. He was McKinley's VP and took office after his assassination. Roosevelt himself was almost assassinated. On the 14th of October 1912, while arriving at a campaign event in Milwaukee, Roosevelt was shot by John Schrank. Schrank believed that the ghost of President McKinley had asked him to kill Roosevelt, who the ghost claimed had killed him. Rather than go straight to hospital, Teddy continued his speech before seeking medical help. Teddy died in his sleep on the 6th of January 1919 from an assumed coronary occlusion caused by a blood clot. The next to die was the 29th president, Warren G. Harding, who was in office from 1921 until 1923. He campaigned on a platform for promising a return to normalcy after the horrors of the First World War. Harding died suddenly during a cross-country tour. He fell ill on the 23rd of July 1923, and over the next few days, he only got worse. On the 2nd of August, he died suddenly of a suspected cerebral hemorrhage. The 27th president to die was Woodrow Wilson, who was the 28th president between 1913 and 1921. Woodrow is noted for his leadership during the First World War and the push for greater international cooperation in the founding of the League of Nations, though he was unable to get the United States to join. He is also infamous for his views on race, and for having the first motion picture shown in the White House being the pro-KKK film Birth of a Nation. Wilson died on the 3rd of February 1924 after years of complications from a stroke, including one in 1919 that left his left side paralyzed. William Howard Taft was the next president to die. Taft was the 27th president in office between 1909 and 1913. He is, unfortunately, best remembered as the president who, due to his size, got stuck in a bathtub in the White House. But this was a myth. thought to have come about as he had larger custom-made bathtubs installed to account for his larger frame. Taft remains the only person to serve as both President and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, serving from 1921 until 1930. His weight did, however, play a role in his death. He died on the 8th of March 1930 of heart disease, inflammation of the liver, and high blood pressure. The 29th president to die was Calvin Coolidge, who was the 30th president. He was in office from 1923 until 1929. Coolidge was Harding's vice president and took office following his death. One notable fact about Coolidge was his adoption of a raccoon named Rebecca. The raccoon had been sent to be eaten as part of the 1926 Thanksgiving meal, but Coolidge refused to kill the animal. Rebecca the raccoon was known for being mischievous and enjoyed playing with soap in the bathtub. When Coolidge left office, Rebecca retired from public office too, living at the Rock Creek Zoo. Now back to the less cute. Coolidge died suddenly on the 5th of January 1933 from a heart attack, aged 60. The next president to die was also the longest serving and the 32nd president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. He remained in office between 1933 and 1945. Prior to FDR, presidents would tend to run for 2 terms based on the precedent set by President George Washington, but there was nothing to stop a president from running for more than 2 terms. FDR ran for 4 terms, seeing the country through recovering after the Great Depression and through much of the Second World War. He died during the start of his 4th term. FDR had long been paralysed by polio and suffered with high blood pressure in the last years of his life. On the 12th of April 1945, he suffered a fatal cerebral hemorrhage. The 31st president to die is arguably the most straightforward, the death of the 35th president, John F. Kennedy. Kennedy was in office between 1961 and 1963 and remains the youngest president to have died. Kennedy's assassination on the 22nd of November 1963 is one of the most analysed events in world history. He was only 46 when he was killed, allegedly assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald whilst travelling through Dallas, Texas in an open-top car. But as you likely know, there are countless theories as to the motive, who was really behind the assassination, and whether or not there were other shooters. Kennedy died from multiple gunshot wounds, the fatal being a shot to his head. The next president to die was Herbert Hoover, the 31st president who was in office between 1929 and 1933. Hoover should perhaps be best remembered for his work in the Commission of Relief in Belgium and the director of the American Relief Administration. During the First World War and in the years following, Hoover oversaw relief efforts providing food for millions of people in Belgium, France and Russia. He died on the 20th of October 1964 at the age of 90. He died from internal bleeding caused in his stomach, but he also had a number of other health problems, including colon cancer and liver cirrhosis. The 33rd president to die was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who served 2 terms from 1953 to 1961. Prior to being president, he was best known for being the Supreme Allied Commander during the Second World War, leading the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. As president, he was largely responsible for pushing America's massive highway networks, inspired by what he had seen in Germany's autobahns, and for pushing the 1957 Civil Rights Act, a major step forward. Eisenhower died on the 28th of March 1969 from heart failure after years of cardiac problems, including a heart attack that he suffered whilst in office. The next to die was Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president who served 2 terms between 1945 and 1953. Truman was FDR's VP and oversaw the last stages of the Second World War. He was the president to give the go-ahead for the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the person who set the stage for the Cold War against the Soviet Union. The Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine both sought to stop the spread of communism in Europe through financial support and direct intervention in conflicts. Truman died on the 26th of December 1972 from pneumonia, aged 88. The 35th president to die was Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th president in office from 1963 to 1969. Johnson was Kennedy's VP and was sworn in after the assassination. It was Johnson who pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But his foreign policy saw the escalation of the war in Vietnam, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers deployed during his presidency. Lyndon B. Johnson died on the 22nd of January 1973 of a massive heart attack. This was likely caused by years of stress, along with heavy smoking. The next to die is one of the most controversial presidents, Richard Nixon, the 37th president. He was in office from 1969 until 1974, being the only president to have resigned from office. His term was mired by the Watergate scandal, an attempt to hide and cover up burglaries and the planting of listening devices at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. Nixon died on the 22nd of April 1994, aged 81. He died from a stroke that caused a blood clot. The next to die was Ronald Reagan, who was in office from 1981 until 1989. Reagan was first a successful actor before making the move to politics. He is seen by some as the president who revived the US economy with his Reaganomics, but by others as one responsible for widening inequality in the country. Reagan survived an assassination attempt on the 30th of March 1981, when he was shot by John Hinckley Jr. Hinckley believed that in shooting the president, he would win the affections of the then 16-year-old actress Jodie Foster. Reagan was struck by a ricocheted bullet, hitting him in the chest and puncturing his lung. 3 other people were hit, including a Secret Service agent named Timothy McCarthy, a police officer named Thomas Delante, and White House Press Secretary James Brady, who was shot in the head and left paralyzed. Reagan died on the 5th of June 2004 from pneumonia, a complication of Alzheimer's disease, a disease he had for the last 20 years of his life. The 38th president to die was the 38th president, Gerald Ford, who was in office from 1974 until 1977. Ford became president following Nixon's resignation, as he was Nixon's vice president. One of his most controversial acts was to grant Nixon a presidential pardon for any crimes committed during his term. Ford died on the 26th of December 2006, aged 93. He died from cerebrovascular disease and a hardening of his arteries. The next to die was George H.W. Bush, the 41st president. He served from 1989 till 1993. His presidency saw the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. During the Second World War, he served as a pilot in the Pacific Theater, flying 58 missions. He continued his love for aviation throughout his life, taking part in skydiving jumps until his 90th birthday. Bush died aged 94 on the 30th of November 2018 due to complications from vascular Parkinsonism. The last president to have died is the longest living, the 39th president, Jimmy Carter. Carter was in office from 1977 until 1981, serving 1 term. He is noted for his humanitarian efforts and Camp David Accords, bringing peace between Egypt and Israel. After his presidency, he founded the Carter Center to promote democracy, fight disease, and mediate conflicts worldwide. He would spend much of his time advocating for and working as a volunteer for the Habitat for Humanity, doing so well into his 90s. Carter died aged 100 from natural causes and heart failure. Today, 5 presidents are still alive, those being Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. In true YouTube fashion, leave a comment stating which president you think will be next.